Alrighty, folks. Welcome back to episode 207 of the Suhu podcast. This spring, we are doing a little mini series called What Changes? So this week, we are talking about what changes when the same ingredient is formulated differently. So, as a reminder for everybody listening, we are running a little podcast listener appreciation special. So, be sure to use the code podcast25 at checkout on SuhuSkin.com for a nice little 25% discount as our way of saying thank you for listening to the podcast. Oh, let's jump into it. Most people have had this experience where the same ingredient shows up in two different products, and one of them works really well, and the other one just doesn't land the same way. It might feel weaker, or maybe it's more irritating, or the effects it's giving are just kind of flatter. And the default assumption is that the ingredient itself is the deciding factor. Either it's going to work for you or it doesn't work for you. But what's actually happening most of the time is that the formulation is what determines how the ingredient is going to behave. So what we want to break down here this week is why the same ingredient doesn't act the same across different products. So Lydia, our skincare PhD expert in chemistry, can you ground that from a formulation perspective?
Yeah, for sure. And I'm a little sick today, so if I sound a little off.
Lydia's a real trooper. Thanks for coming in.
Yeah, exactly. I want to be able to share all the skincare knowledge. Yeah, so the way I think about this, right, is like, I mean, there's a couple things going on. One is like, what kind of product are you buying? Like, sometimes people put rose in a toner. They might put rose in a bath balm. They might put rose in lotion, oil. You kind of get the picture, right? And so, kind of depending on like what type of product you're buying, one product may work really well in your skin, whereas another might not, just based on your skin type. And even if there's the same ingredient in both, you might get a different effect. Like, I don't really do well with bath bombs. They irritate my skin. So for me, like, I would assume that a rose toner would be better than, buying a bath bomb with rose in it. But the other side is like when you're actually comparing, lotion to lotion or oil to oil or sunscreen to sunscreen or whatever, just because one ingredient is in there doesn't necessarily mean that that's the star ingredient, right? And what I mean by that is like you might see something highlighting rose in your toner, but they also have cucumber and 20 other plant extracts or something like that. And they might be advertising the rose, but when you actually look at the ingredient list, there's all these other potential plant extracts that could irritate your skin or might not. You compare it to a different toner where, again, the star focus is rose and they really just have the core ingredients of the toner, and then they have rose, and rose is actually really featured in there. So in that case, right, it's more of a concentration thing and then what else is in the formulation. And so you really want to consider, like, if your skin is sensitive, right, and you're looking for a star ingredient that may really help, right? You want to look for that ingredient as the actual star of the show. And you want to really try to minimize the other ingredients that could contribute to irritation. If you're someone whose skin is less sensitive and you're not so concerned about that, you still might be concerned about functionality though. And so if you notice that you're buying something with 40 different ingredients, a bunch of different extracts, just keep in mind that many of those extracts are going to be at a very low concentration. So you might not get the functional effect of the plant the way that you want it to be, just simply because it's saturated with a lot of other ingredients in there. And then the final piece I would just add is like, you should always check, no matter what you're buying, that the core ingredients of the product make sense. So if you're buying a lotion, there's going to be water first, and then there's going to probably be some kind of glycerin. There's going to be, like some kind of humectant, emollient, and emulsifier in there. Check to make sure those match what you're expecting, right? Sometimes you might buy a product and it was just formulated bad. And so some ingredient in there is irritating your skin or it's not absorbing correctly. And so your star ingredient isn't even getting into your skin the way that it's supposed to, just because the formulation isn't done correctly. And some products that highlight specific actives like vitamin C, or you could look at hyaluronic acid or some of these other kind of like star ingredients like retinols and things like that, those need to be formulated in a way where they're not going to, one, degrade in the formula easily, and also in a way where they're going to get into your skin. So for those types of ingredients, you also want to make sure that the delivery system, the formulation, looks correct to you as well.
Sweet. Yeah. So, like we are always saying, we want to find products that are minimal in their ingredient list, and we want to make sure that those ingredients are actually doing what they say they're going to do. So, we're going to zoom in a little bit on a lot of what you just said there. But the first place I want to go is concentration, because I think that's where a lot of people immediately go. If something works, the instinct is to look for more of it. And there's this underlying assumption that if you have something at a higher concentration, that should mean obviously better results. But surprise, surprise, that doesn't always hold up. At a certain point, increasing the concentration doesn't really increase or improve the performance in the same way. So, what's actually happening here with concentration? What should we be cognizant of when we're looking at the concentration in our products?
Right. So this can get tricky because sometimes reading labels can be a little bit frustrating. So just remember that concentrations go from highest to lowest, but once they get to 1%, they can be listed really in any order. What I always like to go back to is think about the purpose of the ingredient. Does it match the expected concentration? So for some things, right, like hyaluronic acid, especially for like retinoids or like retinol, right, like those percentages are pretty low. And I mean, for retinoid, we're talking like really, really low, right? So that's to be expected. But if you're looking at, vitamin C, or you're looking at, some kind of effective like rosemary oil or things like that, then those concentrations get a little bit higher. But again, we're still usually talking about in the single digit percentage up to sometimes 10% for some of these things like vitamin C. So it's still not, the biggest percentage in your formulation. The stuff that's going to be most prevalent or have the highest percentage is always the thing that carries it into your skin. So that's going to be like the carrier oil, or it's going to be water. And then you're going to have other things to kind of like help create the emulsion if it's a lotion. But those star ingredients are usually lower down on the ingredient list. But what you want to make sure is that they match where they're supposed to be, number one. And then number two, they aren't listed necessarily like in a string of other ingredients all at the 1% line. If you're looking for a vitamin C serum and vitamin C is listed after the preservative, which is usually around 1%, and it's like part of a string of other like plant extracts and things, that vitamin C concentration is probably not high enough to have an actual functional effect on your skin.
Is there such a thing as too much vitamin C in a formulation, or too high a concentration in a formulation?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the way that you can think about this from a chemistry perspective, right, is technically everything on Earth is toxic, right? Like that's the way we consider. That's when we think about toxicity, right? Is it's dose dependent, meaning like if you drink too much water, you will die. If you drink too much coffee, you will die. Same thing with if you put too much retinol on your face might burn. Same thing if you put too much salicylic acid, if you do a acid peel on your face, those things can pretty quickly start to cause damage. But at the right concentration, they're healthy for us, right? So all goes back to the purpose, right? If we're trying to do a gentle face peel, then the acid in the formula should match what a gentle face peel concentration should be. And it shouldn't be higher and it shouldn't be lower.
All right. So if concentration isn't the full story, then the next question is how that ingredient is actually going to get into your skin. Because most people don't really think about what surrounds the ingredient. Like you were mentioning the carrier, whether it be jojoba oil or water, but they're just thinking about that active ingredient itself. So how does that base or that vehicle actually change what happens when you apply it?
Yeah, it's interesting because it kind of depends on the product, and like what the purpose of the ingredient is. Like a lot of times when we're thinking about plant extracts specifically, you'll see those as like essential oils, and everything is mixed in an oil-based format. And the reason for that usually is because oil is really nice at being able to kind of penetrate the outer layer of the skin, and that helps kind of literally carry the ingredients that we care about into that kind of first layer of the skin. Certain ingredients are formulated specifically, like they're designed in the chemical structure to help penetrate the skin deeper. But it's a really interesting question because in general, I think we've talked about this before on podcasts, but things don't actually get that deep into the skin tissue, right? Like we're talking about the outermost layers of the skin most of the time. And so when you're thinking about formulation, you're really trying to think about how do you get the ingredient to kind of like settle into that outermost layer, and how do you have an actual functional effect. So oil is really great at that. There's a lot of different carrier oils. Jojoba oil is really nice because it mimics the skin's natural oil production. And so it does a really good job at kind of like maintaining the skin barrier and also helps the ingredients get into the skin barrier. And it doesn't usually irritate people's skin. Sometimes if your skin is already irritated and you add something that is harsh, so like if my skin is really dry and I put toner on my face, for example, and that toner, has some alcohol in it or something like that, it might irritate my skin worse. And even though there's rose in there, and rose is supposed to be anti-inflammatory and really nice for the skin, that rose might actually start to get into the cracks where the skin is injured. And then like that actually irritates the skin more and causes inflammation. So most of the time, what you're just really looking for is like whatever base is carrying your lotion base, your oil base, whatever product base, that should not irritate your skin, number one. And you should be able to see that it absorbs into your skin nicely. So you shouldn't have like slick oil on your face all day, or you shouldn't have like white lotion cast on your skin all day, right? Unless it's a sunscreen. But yes, you're looking for that nice absorption with no irritation. Then usually you're pretty good to go.
There are some deceptive ingredients in skincare too that are actually just too large to even enter your skin, right?
Yeah, totally. And like it's really interesting because these products are advertised in like so many different ways online to kind of trying to like get around this question. But like big molecules do not penetrate deep into the skin. So collagen is a protein, it's a huge molecule. Even like smaller components of collagen that they might like chop up and like say that they're putting these shorter peptides, like most of the time, none of these molecules are really getting into the skin. And if you're actually looking to like create a functional change in the body, like that usually needs to be an internal process, with the exception of a few actives that have kind of been tried and true, shown that they can kind of change the surface structure of the skin. But like these bigger molecules just simply are not getting into the skin. So be careful. And yeah, it's crazy. Like sometimes products will be just advertised as really, like high luxury products. And then they'll be, $190, $90 to $200. And when you actually look at the ingredients, right, you can really see that most of the product is just like fluff. And then they're highlighting their star ingredient as collagen or whatever it is. And that's not actually contributing to a functional change in the skin at all. Like their product might feel nice on the skin and smell luxurious, but it doesn't cost them much to produce it. And it's not really doing the thing that they are advertising it as potentially doing. And there's a lot of language that kind of like people use, and you can kind of start to notice over time that like tries to get around these types of things so that they don't have to say, exactly what their product is doing or not doing. So
On the
yeah,
other side, oh, sorry, go ahead.
no, yeah, I'm done.
On the other side of that equation, we've done something with the formulation of our vitamin C serum in order to make it more effective at penetration, right?
Yeah, I mean, so like vitamin C as itself is a molecule that your body produces on its own, right? Like you can purify vitamin C, you can put it in a drink, you can put it in skincare, but on its own, it oxidizes pretty easily. It's not that stable on the shelf, and it's not the best at getting into the deeper layers of the skin. And when you're thinking about an active, you want it to get as deep as possible because that's where you start to see the functional effect of change in your skin. So there are amazing scientists who have like designed different versions of the molecule of vitamin C, and they've basically taken vitamin C and they put these like different, we would call them moieties in chemistry, but different caps on the molecule to have different functional effects. And so we didn't specifically design this molecule, but this molecule exists.
Don't want to give you too much credit.
Exactly. As THC ascorbate. And basically, this molecule is just a really nice capped version that's a little bit more stable. And it's also has a high affinity for oil. And because our skin is naturally oily, because our cells have, oil on the outside of them, you can think of it that way, this helps in penetrating these deeper layers of the skin. And this has been fairly well studied, but people are constantly working on this in cosmetic research. Like this is a area of research that's really hot because it is always going to be a problem to try and get things into the skin. which makes sense because our skin is supposed to protect us.
So we've talked about the concentration of these ingredients in our formulations, and we've talked about the delivery, but there's also the timing side of it. Some products, they feel very immediate, and other ones feel more gradual. So it's not just whether the ingredient is getting into the skin, but how it's showing up over time. What's controlling that?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of that is your natural skin processes, right? So, like, your skin has like cellular turnover rates that are on the scale of days, right? And it's interesting, like, most products, if you start one, you can't really have a measurable change for at least a month of using the product. And you typically, like, from a timing perspective, you want to make sure that you are monitoring your skin as you use it to avoid any irritation. So if you are doing some kind of like acid peel or, like an acid treatment or something on your skin, just make sure that you follow the directions really carefully. And you may not see a big difference after the first treatment, but if you do it for several weeks in a row, you might see a more longer gradual change. And so it's kind of like, with anything on the skin, you want to just move cautiously and slowly. When you do introduce a product like a vitamin C product, if you have like a specific goal and you're like, I really have some dark pigmentation or something on my face that I want to see if I can get rid of, my suggestion is to use that product, regularly, make sure that it works well with your skin. And then after about a month of using it, take pictures, right? Like take pictures at the beginning, take pictures at the end, and kind of see if you see change. And if you don't, then my recommendation is to look for products potentially with a higher concentration, or you can talk to your dermatologist and kind of figure out what's going on there and what will best address your specific issue. But in general, these processes are gradual. And that's actually a good thing because we don't want our skin to be super reactive to anything we put on it, right? It's our protective barrier. So we want it to change slowly.
All right, yeah. So when you put all of this together, the concentration, the delivery, the interactions, and the release, you can start to see why the same exact ingredient can behave so differently in one product versus the other because just being present in the formula doesn't really tell you how it's going to behave or perform. But so Lydia, we talked a little bit already about the ingredient list being just one very small piece of the broader picture. What do you have any tips for us in terms of evaluating our skincare before we purchase it?
Yeah, I mean, I think, going back to keeping things simple is always pretty important. And I do really recommend, like, if you have a specific skincare need that you want checked out, it always helps to just go see a dermatologist because they'll typically be able to tell you, like, exactly what's going on. Always, but sometimes it can just be helpful to have that. But if you're just thinking more broadly or like how to improve my skincare and know that what I'm buying is effective, especially if it's not a prescription strength thing, then really I would say the two key takeaways are know what you're looking for when you go to shop. So if you are looking for a vitamin C serum that has 10% vitamin C in it, do a little research and find something that matches what you're actually looking for versus just Googling vitamin C serum or something like that. Similar if you're looking for scalp maintenance serum, like make sure you look for the concentrations that you would expect and use that little cheat sheet of like the ingredient list information to kind of figure out what the concentration probably is based around known other items like preservatives and things that happen to be at 1% or 2% or 3%. You can usually kind of figure it out. And then the second piece I would say is make sure if you're looking for a specific star ingredient that it actually is the star ingredient of the formula. So if you're looking for something with anti-inflammatory properties and it's a specific essential oil, make sure that plant is actually truly featured in that product as a true essential oil and that it is the primary thing in the formulation and you're not looking for, and again, it might not be the highest concentration, right? Because the carrier oils and the other important components that are structural to the formula, but it should be there featured in a way where you trust that that ingredient actually will have a functional effect. If it's in a list of 40 other plant extracts somewhere in the middle, it's probably not going to do anything. those would be my two key things. So it's looking at concentration, and if you're looking for a specific ingredient, make sure they formulated it in a way that it actually is featured and is the star.
And you know what? I'm starting to see this bigger painting that we're putting together on this podcast as we've talked about, natural versus organic as marketing tools and investigating sourcing and now investigating formulation. It sounds like a whole lot of work, but as you're doing any one of these things, as you're looking into any one of these things, you're really uncovering a lot about all of them. If you're interested in learning more about what natural really means for a specific product and you start digging into the sourcing for that product, you're going to learn about the formulation as well. And if you're interested in, how much of, let's just say, how much of this rosehip oil is really in my product because I'm interested in its effects from a formulation standpoint, you're going to learn about the sourcing as well and what that means for organic versus not organic for that particular product. So I think really what we're talking about is not, 4 or 5 different massive investigations that consumers need to do before they purchase anything, but really just starting to ask more detailed questions than what's in this, and more about like, where is this coming from and what is it supposed to do?
Maybe just add that, you aren't necessarily going to find concentrations so readily available because people want to keep their formulas and the way they make things a little bit secret, right?
Totally.
And that's okay. It's like you're at a restaurant, you're not going to get necessarily the specific instructions to the special sauce that makes that restaurant, on the map. But, with that being said, you can use these clues to help you figure things out. And a brand should never be specifically trying to hide something about their ingredients, right? Like there's a difference between trusting that they have proprietary information that they want to keep proprietary and actively hiding information on their website, which does happen sometimes when you look at ingredient lists and they say one thing, but then you look at the ingredients and the ingredient list says another, right? That's a marketing ploy, not just like a understandable need to keep something, proprietary. So I would just add that a lot of brands aren't out to get you with not sharing this information, but like many of them are. So
so watch out. And yeah, just ask good questions. And if you're curious what those good questions are, keep listening to the podcast. But yeah, so today's take on if you the specific takeaway for today's podcast though is that the same ingredient can give you very different results just depending on how it's formulated. And that really comes down to concentration, delivery, interactions in the formulas, and how it's released over time. So it's not just what's in the product, as we say almost every podcast, it's the whole system behind the product. So if you guys want a deeper breakdown on any of this, we have a blog on our website, SuhUskin.com/blog, that dives into the topic a little deeper with some citations. And next week, join us as we continue our spring reveals series. We're wrapping up the What Changes mini series, part of our spring reveals theme, with what changes as a product breaks down over time. And then once more, I want to remind you guys, we have a podcast appreciation discount for all of our listeners. Just use the code podcast25.
Yes.
And you'll get a little 25% off gift from us. So thanks a bunch, guys. We'll talk to you next week.